Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us. Next week, we're going to be having a fantastic podcast featuring Bruce Blackburn, CEO of Merlin Burrows, and John Hart, Director of Operations at Merlin Burrows, regarding the fantastic discovery of the Bonhomme Richard, Bonnie Dick, however you want to call her, a discovery first made by our beloved friend and mentor, Timothy Akers, which is, of course, one of the most famous shipwrecks in maritime history. A ship that was gifted by the French to the early Americans, captained by John-Paul Jones, who took this famous galleon into British waters and engaged in a battle with the English. And in sort of a pirate-like move, commandeered the English ship, the Serapis, and sailed it off with a victory, while his beloved Bonhomme Richard sank burning into the waters off the coast of Filey in England. And this was our first trip there in 2015 when Chris and I first dove there without any protective gear on, and it was our first view.
All right, we're about to go back in the freezing water to try to look for a cannon that belonged to a ship.
It was our first view of this incredible shipwreck. Very difficult place to dive.
We got our trowel, we got our GPS.
Very difficult, mostly because of the conditions of the ship. And the first thing that we noticed when we were diving in these waters was the fact that we're looking at a field of rubble and boulders, inside of which are nested these various bits of debris from the shipwreck. But sure enough, as soon as we started to dive down and retrieve pieces, we started to notice that this was indeed the resting place of a tremendous battle. Finding pieces and recovering pieces of debris, of beams of wood with metal brass pins in them, everything burned to smithereens, as you would expect from the shipwreck of the Bonhomme Richard, even including bottles that were jammed in between boulders, things that came from the shipwreck hundreds of years ago. But it was clear that the way that we were approaching it would have to improve.
It's like a meat grinder for any ship that would traverse that area.
And you can see we have a beam of wood here, and in this beam of wood, which could well be from the Bonhomme Richard, has a rivet of some sort, which could well be from an old galleon. So we would ultimately end up going back dozens and dozens of times. My girlfriend Claudia, who ended up joining us on one of the expeditions, and it would be the first of dozens of expeditions that we would conduct back in this area, this time prepared, this time proper dive team. And this is when Tim Yarrow, Rich Keys, great divers, good friends of mine, and of course, if you're ever looking for a great place to learn how to dive, I highly recommend Dive Shack, a terrific dive school out of Harrogate, owned by Tim Yarrow. And we ended up going back many times, each time revealing more secrets about this incredible shipwreck, this incredible discovery. Here we have John Hart, Director of Operations at Merlin Burrows, and we went back prepared. This was, we have Chris Heapy here helping me put my dry suit on. I took no chances after the first time. And it's the North Sea after all, so going prepared is important. You have to be comfortable, otherwise you get hypothermia and die.
Water is part of diving. That's good wind over the last few days, so all we can do is keep our fingers crossed.
So this was the first of dozens of additional dives that we conducted in the area, this time obviously prepared. As you can see, what we determined was, because of the state of the wreck and because of all of the rubble that you find on top, the best way to get in there was actually with handheld metal detectors, so you can actually reach in to the nooks and crannies to actually try to retrieve artifacts. And we did. We started to retrieve dozens, if not hundreds, of beams of wood, bits of trunk and whatnot, all burned, all indicative of a shipwreck, which was the size of a galleon that had been burnt to smithereens. And we're the first to register the shipwreck. I think National Geographic tried to go look for it and failed on numerous occasions. So we're the first company to actually find the shipwreck and register it. And we ended up taking artifacts back to Harrogate for analysis, which was eye-opening, very exciting.
The more research that goes in, the more successful the project becomes. And 99.99% of the work is actually old-fashioned research.
Bruce Blackburn,
where they go
who's the
into
CEO
historical
of
documents,
Merlin Burrows,
records, letters even information that other people have found which might not be readily available. And it's bringing all of this together that makes all the difference.
of course, John Hart, Director of Operations.
Or prove that we found what we know to be there. We've then got issues about ongoing security.
He'll be joining us next week. And of course, our beloved dear mentor and friend, Timothy Akers.
They're actually within half an inch of the same length.
All fascinating. These discoveries are incredible.
An internal structure because of the nature of what it is. It's brass, not copper.
Very exciting stuff. So,
Just think John Paul Jones could have stood on that.
everything gets stored back in water in order for preservation of the materials.
It's classed as the #1 American find to the Americans only. Many Britons class John Paul Jones as a pirate.
So make sure you join us next week for our podcast, and we'll be announcing what time and what day it'll be coming out. Join me and Bruce Blackburn and John Hart. Next week we'll be discussing everything about the Bonhomme Richard and this incredible discovery, which is of enormous importance to the world. So hope to see you soon, and thank you for logging in. Thank you for checking us out.